All right, light up those vagina candles, ladies. We are talking about goop. Women Are Not Lemmings, critically acclaimed actress, businesswoman, goopologist, and Nepo baby supreme Gwyneth Paltrow told USA Today in 2018. Just because we are raising a question doesn't mean that we're expecting somebody to follow our advice. Paltrow's manifesto was in response to Goop Summit attendees wondering if she herself supported the trusted experts she hosted. Some experts were psychics, some were panelists discussing tantric sex and meditation practices and vampire facials and all that good stuff, and some were anti-vax and anti-HIV medication peddlers like Dr. Kelly Brogan, who famously considered the wisdoms like the need to get a flu shot or the fact that HIV leads to AIDS as nothing more than memes we hold on to societally as truths. On whether or not Paltrow herself followed the advice of Dr. Brogan and other platform speakers, we believe women are intuitive enough and intelligent enough to hear both sides of a lot of things and make a decision for themselves that's resonant for them. Her response obviously did not accept any form of accountability, but instead grouped her with the masses, aka her audience of majority wealthy white women. Her innocence in platforming and therefore peddling controversial and dangerous views on health and safety is predicated on the notion that Paltrow is an independent learner, just like us, taking in all sides of all arguments and figuring it out on her own as a free-thinking woman. Women are not lemmings, she says, but I think we are, and I will die on that cliff. Lemmings are those little rodent guys that live in tundras and burrow in the winter and eat mosses and grasses and supposedly also commit mass suicide. Their herd mentality, constant fluctuations in populations, and general foolishness gave rise to the stereotype of the lemmings as creatures that follow each other off cliffs. This sort of mythological, but also ridiculously goofy, frenzied behavior of the rodents gave us a great insult for someone who doesn't notice the metaphorical cliffs they're about to plummet over. For the kind of person who ignorantly and blissfully follows the will of others and doesn't second guess. If you fit this description, you might be a lemming. I'm not afraid of this label though, because as a consumer, and especially as a consumer of celebrity culture, I am a lemming, and so are you, probably. Paltrow's assertion that we are intuitive enough to hear both sides and find resonance in solution suggests an air of choice that I don't think exists at the Goop Summit or in other market settings where a beloved public figure is placing ideologies or products right in front of you. We're especially choiceless when there is a health crisis influencing our behavior. And while there's not one obvious health-related pressure bringing consumers to Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, there is a greater culture of dissatisfaction that Goop builds off and profits from, one that places women at the center as the dissatisfied. Goop is about cleanliness, feminine maximization, and wellness in a world of toxicity, misogyny, and tired paradigms about health. The greater health crisis is everything. Climate change, worsening mental health at large, the taxing work week, the constancy of illness and pandemic. If your apartment lacks natural light and you miss out on that optimal circadian stimulus, you might not be as alert or productive. No problem, girl. You can get a Skyview lamp for just $349. Any girly wanting to detox her body and also not drink coffee normally can buy the Implantorama at-home coffee enema for just $135. You heard that right, and you can get it sized up to a gallon. Goop, like other clean beauty, health and wellness brands like Jessica Alba's Honest Company, thrive by commodifying fear and alarmism, convincing consumers that what they are buying in the regular marketplace is contaminated with chemicals and an excess of harmful ingredients. And I don't know, they're right for the most part, but they aren't always providing a solution in direct opposition to this notion, but instead just providing a product that's based in pseudoscience and meeting a need that it created by existing in the first place.
Okay, hi, interruption. I'm interrupting because it must be said I am not trying to dog on Gwyneth Paltrow. I actually think she's a talented actress and a hilarious public figure. She uses her Oscar as a doorstop, and she goes to high-ranking universities to shout vagina, vagina, vagina to all the business students. And that right there, my friends, that right there is the American dream.
American women have tremendous purchasing power, and it is widely understood that mothers control 85% of household purchases, from food to clothes to automobiles. Many companies recognize this and cater to their power. It's why mommy bloggers are such prime candidates to serve the Instagram marketplace. Their audiences trust and relate to their voices, and if Ballerina Farm says that this Tupperware is BPA-free and Sylvan like a mason jar, it must be worth the purchase. Women whose needs are historically misunderstood by doctors and healthcare industries running on patriarchal standards now have a plethora of solutions and products to meet our many needs. The great buzzword self-care has been gendered and socially constructed to represent a state of feel-goodism best coupled with consumerism, but more on that later. Making women feel seen, heard, and understood in a medical, therapeutic, or pharmaceutical setting is truly very important, and it's finally mainstream, at least for the white middle and upper class goopies guzzling collagen and consciously breathing at Paltrow's Wellness Summit. But the concept of a cure-all, a nostrum, or a concoction curated for and advertised specifically to women is no new feat. One of the most formative periods of modern American healthcare, a system we now know to be a flux of organizational, financial, and clinical disaster, was at the turn of the 20th century. Mainstream doctors of the late 1800s opposed several forces that partially contributed to our ever-present, ever-relevant, steadily increasing cost of medical care. For one, there was major price competition among a surplus of doctors. The revolutionary innovation of public health and the new science of medicine resulted in free care at many dispensaries. Great, right? But many physicians needing or wanting some extra bucks were loosely assembling medical schools to collect those lecture fees. There was also a new wave of alternative healers selling naturalistic therapy and benefiting from weak licensure laws. But the phenomenon that eventually led us to goop and its infamous insertable jade egg or vaginal steaming were the cure-alls. Everyone had a cure for everything. Physicians made up their own cures and advertised them on their calling cards. Pharmacists made new compounds and stole the compounds of others whose prescriptions they filled. Companies sprang up with thousands of medicines. Rapidly proliferating products, contracts, and services threatened the income of many physicians forced to raise their prices. Surgeon and cooperative advocate James Peter Warbass wrote despairingly in 1912, "The matter with the medical profession is that the doctor is a private tradesman engaged in a competitive business for profit. It is difficult, nay, impossible for him to do otherwise. He is surrounded by the competitive system, and unless he conforms to the methods of warfare about him, he must go down." One of the most threatening and also unlikely to emerge tradesmen, or I should say tradeswomen, was Lydia Pinkham, the Gwyneth Paltrow of the Gilded Age. "Why go see a doctor?" Pinkham's product read. "I will personally advise you about your health problems." Her vegetable compound claimed to cure any and all female ailments, from weakness to hysteria. It consisted of 5 herbs: pleurisy root as an antispasmodic and anti-inflammatory, life root as a uterine tonic and diuretic, the tissue-replacing fenugreek, unicorn root to improve ovarian function, and black cohosh for menopausal symptoms. There was also a shit ton of drinking alcohol to do all of the things that drinking alcohol does. The vegetable correspondence was the cure, but it was Pinkham's letter correspondence with customers seeking womanly medical advice, a campaign starting in the late 1870s that made her succeed. Ad copy read, "Confide in me, tell me your troubles, frankly and without reservation. A woman best understands a woman's ills." Indeed, says historian Jennifer Black, much of Pinkham's appeal was to create a community of women who advised other women, who shared stories with other women, and who had particular knowledge of women's problems that only a woman could understand. The male-dominated world of hospitals and pharmacies did not solicit the trust and therefore the purchasing power of women with no feminine image to lean on. Such men morally judged, misguided, and misdiagnosed female patients whose propriety and embarrassment truncated their discussion of intimate medical issues. Write to Lydia. She understands. She will help you when no one else even tries. Lydia Pinkham was America's first female millionaire. She wasn't a doctor, but an inventor and a fabulous marketer that dabbled in brewing home recipes. She was wildly successful and beloved by the women who bought her 40% proof spirit and wrote to her for advice. But she died in 1883. She did not write any of those letters. A team of copywriters did the job and signed her name. Pinkham's portrait on the bottle of the compound was just that, an image, one that created an emotional bond with the company's consumers and humanized the product. Lydia Pinkham was one of the first medical trade characters. The Gilded Age transformed aestheticization of advertising into a mode of demonstrating character in American business. Testimonial and endorsement still carried great influence, but trade characters, fictional or idealized people built to maintain corporate reputation, began their reign. Drawing from established rhetorics and iconographies of virtue, these spokes-characters offered the potential to build both real and imagined connections between producers and consumers, says Black. Cultural discourse mirrored this institutional apparatus in emphasizing the importance of virtue and character for the market. In the Gilded Age and progressive years, wealthy industrialists such as Andrew Carnegie began promoting older notions of virtue and character as essential ingredients for social mobility and economic success in America's rapidly industrializing society. Black describes how Carnegie articulated his moralized vision of the world, a blend of Protestant ethics with conversations about rugged masculinity and racialized arguments about social Darwinism. Concepts like honesty, reliability, and loyalty were framed as the force of character, of true manhood. Conversely, true womanhood was demonstrated by Lydia Pinkham's onus of verification and reliability. Her portrait on the bottle built public goodwill just by representing her image, an older woman with advice to give, compassion to share, and a tonic to sell. Trade characters can wield greater power than actual people sometimes, because we will never know the actual people. The closest we get to the authenticity of public figures is through the image they give us. And since the Gilded Age, the images they give us are the images we see. Oh, and I should probably add that Pinkham's herbal alcohol was eventually rejected by medical officials as a quack remedy, and in 1922 it was dismissed as a valueless preparation kept on the market for about 50 years by means of lying advertisement and worthless testimonial. The company changed the formula when the FDA was formed, and it's still around, but in a slightly different form. Anyways, back to Goop. Because celebrities with health or wellness brands, like it or not, they are our new trade characters. Jessica Alba serves as a beautiful bobblehead selling us chemophobia with her perhaps not honest enough honest company. So what if HC got sued twice in the same month for false advertising and severe sunburns post-sunscreen application? Jessica Alba cares about people and the planet. It says so on her website, and she had asthma as a child, if you even care. Kourtney Kardashian cares about my sleeping patterns and my fat-burning capacity, maybe, so she created Lemming, who knew there were so many things to demand. French philosopher Guy Debord addressed the pitfalls of celebrity in his Theory of the Spectacle, his 1967 critique of late capitalist society. Debord claims, "The entire life of societies in which modern conditions of production reign announces itself as an immense accumulation of spectacles. Everything that was directly lived has moved away into a representation. We live in a society defined by representational reality, by spectacular images that aren't just defined by an overabundance of media, but by a lived experience of pseudo-reality that we accept as truth, a shift into role-playing. We're obsessed with images and appearances above all else, and the celebrity, the spectacular representation of a living human being, is the agent of the spectacle." Debord says the condition of the star is the specialization of the seemingly lived, the object of identification with apparent life without depth. Celebrities act out various types of living that their fans, the individuals, will never experience in an accessible manner. The star is the opposite of the individual, the star of consumption. He suggests that in assuming the role of celebrity, one must accept that their identity will be consumed by the public. Their personality is for sale and therefore no longer solely their own. Do we actually know these people, or is there a distinction to be made between the credible persona and the authentic private identity that we will never truly know? Within image-driven late-stage capitalism, we value self-care as something to be consumed, not valued as an intrinsic step towards enlightenment. Women's magazines and media influences present self-transformation as self-monitoring, a series of choices regarding fitness, cosmetics, and diet programs where the woman can seemingly achieve success or happiness by her own self-determination. It's all about metrics in a world of endless innovation. We can't just will ourselves into a better state, but we must record the data, monitor the data, and repeat. Self-care is advertised as this great antithesis to our labor, the labor that forces us to need self-care to begin with, the solution to the culture of dissatisfaction that Goop defies. But self-care is kind of a form of work in itself, or at least a mechanism that the greater powers controlling our labor utilize to keep workers deceptively rested and cared for. Art historian Mia Tokumitsu wrote in 2018, "Capitalism's more evolved form, neoliberalism, has delivered another, more pernicious sedative to take the edge off: medicinal jargon." She describes the language of self-improvement as not one that motivates, but ameliorates. Workers' bodies are constantly monitored and demanded for longer. Bargaining rights are weakened, and yet corporate wellness programs are bigger than ever. Capitalism will deplete you while letting you think that you have the means to improve your lot. Indeed, it will attempt to force its therapy on you. Employees might be underworked and overpaid, but if they do a tree pose or let out an ohm enough, their overlords might be able to dispel any momentum of mutiny with a masquerade of company mindfulness. Self-care wasn't always corporatized or commodified by celebrity, though, and for much of the 20th century, it was a radical political act to reclaim one's autonomy, particularly for women and people of color. Leaders within the Black Panther Party, such as Angela Davis or Erica Huggins, adopted mindfulness techniques like yoga or meditation while incarcerated, and once released, championed the power of physical movement arts to preserve mental strength while navigating state violence or socio-political adversity. Radical self-care is a way to value ourselves within a system constantly teaching us to devalue ourselves. Social movements are about a unified collective, but they only achieve longevity if individuals are cared for. By 1970, all Black Panther Party chapters ran a free health clinic. In 1972, the party issued a 10-point program on the importance of community care in the fight for social justice. Collective self-care doesn't mean buying facial toning devices, yoni steaming, or bee venom therapy. It could mean community health clinics, proper nutrition and breakfast programs, and lessons in physical movement like the martial arts to better appreciate one's body, not to nitpick it and monitor. Holistic needs of Black communities and Black activists have always been a part of community organizers' tactics, says Penn State's Miriam K. Aziz. Black women, often queer, pushed other activists towards caring for themselves as a necessary everyday revolutionary practice. Prominent feminist writer and philosopher Audre Lorde constantly expressed that daily self-care and self-reflection was civic duty. Caring for myself is not self-indulgent, she wrote in 1988. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. So maybe we are lemmings, but that doesn't have to be such a terrible thing. Maybe instead of following Jessica Alba and Kourtney Kardashian off the cliff, because let's face it, they've got a big fat lemming yacht waiting for them down there, maybe we jump off the cliff together and we learn how to swim. As journalist Hope Talbot says, despite the cultural dominance that white wealthy women such as Gwyneth Paltrow have over self-care, we must continually pay homage to self-care as a radical practice. In doing so, we should be keen to approach self-care as a key dimension of activism and social change more broadly, rather than purely a marketing buzzword. Maybe self-care, when divorced from celebrity and separate from spectacle, maybe it can actually be about us, about navigating a world that wants us to conform to standards that don't allow women to actually take a breath. Say what you will about lemmings, but that's a damn strong collective if I've ever seen one.